The afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows of the Senate Banking Committee hearing room, casting long shadows across the mahogany table. Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana sat patiently, wire-rimmed glasses perched on his nose, answering questions about fiscal responsibility with the measured cadence of a man who'd spent 5 terms managing Louisiana's treasury. The room was half empty. Most senators had already left for the day. A handful of reporters scrolled through their phones. Bored, CSPAN's cameras recorded everything with mechanical indifference. Then the doors burst open. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stormed in her entrance. More theatrical production than arrival. Supporters in the gallery erupted in applause. Phones came out recording. The energy in the room shifted instantly, like someone had flipped a switch from sleepy afternoon hearing to viral moment incoming. She didn't sit. She stood at the edge of the committee table, one hand gripping the back of a chair, the other already rising to point. Senator Kennedy. Her voice cut through the room like a knife through butter. Your folksy act might fool Louisiana, but we know what you really are. A racist relic protecting billionaires while people die. The gallery exploded. Tell him, AOC. Someone shouted. Others took up the chant. Twitter fingers flew across screens. Within seconds, # Kennedy is racist started trending. Kennedy didn't move. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a handkerchief, and began cleaning his glasses slowly, deliberately, as if he had all the time in the world. The chairman banged his gavel weakly. The congresswoman will please, but AOC wasn't finished. She was just getting started. You vote against health care while people die from treatable diseases. You protect oil companies while Louisiana, your state, drowns from climate change. You defend billionaires while families sleep in their cars. She was on a roll now. Voice rising, finger stabbing the air like a weapon. Her supporters in the gallery cheered every accusation. Reporters stopped scrolling and started typing furiously. This was the content they'd come for. Your policies are literally killing people and you sit there with that patronizing smile like this is all a joke to you. Kennedy finished cleaning his glasses, placed them back on his nose, looked at her with the patient attention of a grandfather watching a child throw a tantrum at Thanksgiving dinner. Are you quite finished, ma'am? The simple question seemed to infuriate her more. Finished? I haven't even started with you. You fossilized. Good. Kennedy interrupted his Louisiana draw, thick as molasses and twice as smooth. Because since we're discussing who protects billionaires and who hurts working people, perhaps we should examine your record for a moment. He reached for a manila folder. The movement was unhurried, almost casual, but something in the room shifted. Reporters leaned forward. Even AOC's supporters in the gallery sensed the change. Let's talk about September 2021. Kennedy continued opening the folder. A beautiful evening in New York City. The Met Gala. Do you remember that night? Congresswoman AOC's eyes narrowed. What does that have to do with? You wore a beautiful dress that night. White. Had "Tax the Rich" written on it in red letters. Very dramatic. Got you a lot of attention on social media. He pulled out a photograph. AOC in the white gown. The message blazing across her back. That dress. The one you used to lecture rich people about paying their fair share. Kennedy's voice was gentle, almost sympathetic. You didn't pay for it. Neither did you pay for the hairstyling, the makeup, the hotel room, or your boyfriend's tuxedo. Not right away. Anyhow, the gallery murmured. Some of AOC's supporters looked confused. You only paid after the House Ethics Committee started investigating. Funny how that works, isn't it? AOC's face was wreathing. That's taken completely out of context. The Ethics Committee cleared me of. Kennedy interrupted softly. The committee found you violated House rules. Ma'am, those are their words, not mine. He paused, letting that sink in. Accepted impermissible gifts, they said. Failed to pay full fair market value. Their words. He pulled out another folder. This one was thicker. But let's discuss something even more interesting. Let's talk about what happened when you convinced Amazon not to build their headquarters in New York City. AOC stood straight or defensive. That was corporate welfare. We saved taxpayers billions. You cost New York tens of thousands of jobs. The number hung in the air. Kennedy didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. Tens of thousands of families who could have had good paying jobs. Good careers. A better life. But they don't matter much when you're busy being a social media star. Do they? He opened the folder fully. Inside were hundreds of letters neatly organized. These are from some of those families. From New Yorkers who lost opportunities because of your victory. Some of them are here today. Actually, the camera panned across the gallery. Several regular-looking people sat among the crowd. One woman clutched a sign that read, "I needed that job." Kennedy looked back at AOC. His voice was still gentle. But there was steel underneath. "Now, we've got about 3 more hours left in this hearing. Congresswoman, you wanted to talk about who protects billionaires and who hurts working people." He settled back into his chair. "Buckle up, ma'am, because we're just getting started." Kennedy clicked the remote in his hand. The screen behind him lit up with 2 images side by side. On the left, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in that white designer gown. "Tax the rich," emblazoned in red across her back. She was smiling, radiant, surrounded by celebrities and fashion icons at the Met Gala. On the right, a house in Puerto Rico. Roof caved in, water-stained walls, buckets on the floor catching leaks from above. An elderly woman's home destroyed. The contrast was devastating. "Let's be very specific about the Met Gala," Kennedy said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "Because I believe in facts." He clicked again. A timeline appeared. September 13, 2021. You attend the Met Gala as a guest. You receive a custom designer dress, a handbag, shoes, jewelry. You also receive professional hairstyling, professional makeup, transportation, and hotel accommodations. Your boyfriend receives formal wear as well. Click. September, October, November, December, January, February. 6 months pass. The people who provided these services, they haven't been paid. Click. February 22, 2022. The House Ethics Committee begins its investigation. Click. February 24. Suddenly, the hairstylist gets paid. Click. March 16. The makeup artist finally receives her money. Click. May 10. 8 months after the event. Brothers the design house receives payment for some of the goods. Kennedy turned to face AOC. "Notice a pattern, Congresswoman." AOC stood defensive. "There were administrative delays. My staff handles these. 6 months isn't a delay. Ma'am, 6 months is a choice." Kennedy clicked to the next image. A photo of a young black woman standing in front of a small hair salon in Brooklyn. "This is Jessica," Kennedy said quietly. "Single mother of 2 owns this salon. She was thrilled when brothers contacted her to do hair for the Met Gala. It was the biggest client she'd ever had. The biggest night of her professional career." He paused, letting the room absorb the image. "She charged less than $500. That's it, for hours of work on the most important job she'd ever booked." Another photo appeared, a stack of invoices, each one stamped with dates. September, October, November. Jessica sent her invoice in September. Then she called in October. Sent a follow-up email in November. Called again in December. Sent another email in January. Called again in February. Kennedy's voice remained even, but his words landed like hammer blows. "For 6 months. This single mother who lives in the district you claim to represent couldn't get paid for work she'd done. She told my staff she almost lost her salon because her cash flow dried up. She had to take out a payday loan. Do you know what those interest rates are? Congresswoman, 40%, sometimes more. She paid $300 in fees and interest just to borrow $2 to keep her business alive." He clicked to show another image. Jessica's salon, a modest storefront with her name hand-painted on the window. This was her dream. She'd worked as an assistant in other salons for 8 years. Saving every penny. Finally opened her own place in 2019. Then the pandemic hit. She survived that barely. Then she got the Met Gala job. It was supposed to be her big break. The visibility, the prestige, the money. Instead, it nearly destroyed her. Kennedy's voice softened. She told my staff that she cried herself to sleep some nights, wondering why a congresswoman who preaches about helping working people couldn't be bothered to pay her salon bill. She said the worst part wasn't the money. It was feeling invisible, feeling like she didn't matter to someone who was supposed to represent her. AOC tried to interrupt. "My staff was responsible for you're the boss," Kennedy said firmly. "The buck stops with you. Isn't that what you always say about CEOs and corporations, that they're responsible for everything that happens under their watch?" The gallery had gone quiet. Even AOC's supporters seemed uncertain. Now Kennedy pulled out a thick document. The House Ethics Committee's official report. Would you like me to read their findings? He didn't wait for an answer. Representative Ocasio-Cortez violated House rules by failing to pay the full market value for her attire, accessories, and services. Not delayed payment. Not administrative oversight. Violated. He looked up from the report. Even after they caught you. Even after you finally started paying people. You still didn't pay full value. The committee determined you still owed thousands more. A financial breakdown appeared on the screen. Kennedy read through it, translating the bureaucratic language into something everyone could understand. The designer dress and accessories. You paid less than a third of what they were actually worth. The hotel and transportation paid 8 months late. Your boyfriend's ticket to the gala never paid for at all. He clicked to a new image. AOC at the Met Gala again. This time from a different angle. In the background, you could see other guests. Actors, musicians, business titans, people for whom spending tens of thousands on a single evening was nothing. Now about that dress. Tax the rich. Powerful statement. Kennedy's voice was mild conversational. Except here's the thing. To attend this event as a regular guest costs more than most of your constituents make in a year. And you went there wearing a message about taxing the wealthy while accepting thousands in free luxury goods that you didn't properly report or pay for. He shook his head slowly. Congresswoman, I'm from a small town in Louisiana. We have a saying down there. Don't preach water and drink wine. Kennedy clicked to a new series of images. Let's talk about your lifestyle for a moment. Not to be intrusive, but since you've made yourself a public figure who lectures others about wealth and fairness. Photo. A Tesla Model 3. Sleek and expensive. 2020. You purchase an electric car. A Tesla. These retail for well over $50. That's what you chose to spend your money on. Photo 2. Apartment buildings. One in DC. One in New York. You maintain 2 residences. 2 apartments. 2 cities. Your monthly rent combined is several thousand. That's your choice. Of course, you earn a good salary. But it's interesting. Photo screenshots from AOC's own Instagram account. Upscale restaurants. Artisol cocktails. Expensive meals. You dine at restaurants where the appetizers cost more than your constituents spend on groceries for a week. Again, your money. Your choices. Then Kennedy clicked to the image that brought everything together. The split screen returned. AOC at the Met Gala. AOC's grandmother's destroyed house in Puerto Rico. Your grandmother, Kennedy said softly. Your own flesh and blood. Her house was destroyed by Hurricane Maria in 2017. For years she lived with that collapsed roof. Those water-damaged walls. Those buckets catching rainwater. For years. He leaned forward slightly. You earn over $180 a year. That's more than 3 teachers make combined. More than most families in your district will ever see. Your grandmother's roof. It would have cost maybe $10,000 to fix. Less than 2 months of your combined rent. Less than a fifth of what you paid for your Tesla. The room was completely silent now. But instead of helping her, you posted photos of her suffering on Twitter to attack a political opponent. You used your own grandmother's misery as a prop. Kennedy's voice hardened just slightly. So, when you lecture me about protecting billionaires while people suffer, forgive me if I find that a bit rich. No pun intended. AOC tried to speak. But Kennedy was already pulling out another massive folder. But you know what? Personal hypocrisy is one thing. Let's talk about something that affected tens of thousands of people. Let's discuss what happened when Amazon wanted to bring jobs to New York. He dropped the folder on the table. It landed with a heavy thud that echoed through the chamber. These are letters from just some of the families whose lives you destroyed. Would you like to read them or should I? A woman stood up in the gallery. Mid-40s. Wearing this simple dress that had been washed and ironed carefully. The kind of outfit someone wears when they want to look their best but don't have much to work with. My name is Maria Rodriguez, she said, her voice shaking slightly. I'm a single mother of 3. I live in the Bronx in your district. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. The room fell silent. Even the reporters stopped typing to listen. In 2018, when Amazon announced they were building their headquarters in Queens, I applied for a job. I was working 2 jobs at the time. Morning shift at Walmart, evening shift at McDonald's, trying to keep my kids fed, trying to keep a roof over our heads. Maria's voice grew stronger. Amazon gave me a conditional offer pending construction completion. I had a job waiting in logistics. It would have paid over $90 a year. She let that number sink in. 90,000. That's more than triple what I was making working 2 jobs. My kids could have had their own rooms instead of sharing one bedroom. I could have afforded an apartment without roaches. My oldest could have thought about college instead of wondering if he'd have to drop out of high school to help with rent. Maria looked directly at AOC. Then you decided Amazon was corporate welfare. You celebrated when they left. You called it a victory. Her voice cracked. Where's my victory, Congresswoman? She sat down. The silence that followed was deafening. Kennedy stood slowly. Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. Your courage in coming here today matters. He turned to the screen. Clicked his remote. A timeline appeared. November 2018. Amazon announces they'll build a second headquarters in Long Island City, Queens. The deal promises tens of thousands of jobs. Not just at Amazon, but in construction, retail, food service, transportation. Good jobs. Jobs that pay enough to raise a family on. Images flashed across the screen. Construction workers, tech employees, retail staff, real people, not statistics. The average salary for these positions would have been well over $100. That's life-changing money for working families. That's send your kids to college money. That's buy a house money. That's retire someday money. Kennedy pulled out a simple whiteboard and marker. Now, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez said New York was giving away billions to Amazon. Let me explain why that's not how it works. He drew a simple diagram. Imagine you're offered a job. It pays $150,000 a year. Your taxes on that would be about $30,000. You'd keep $120,000. He looked at AOC. Would you turn down that job because you don't want your boss to keep $30 of your labor? Would you say, no thanks, I'd rather have $0. So my boss doesn't get anything either. A few people in the gallery actually laughed. Not at Kennedy's joke, at the absurdity of the logic he was describing. That's what you did to New York. That's what you did to Maria Rodriguez and tens of thousands like her. You saved them from a deal where the city would have collected billions in taxes from jobs that didn't exist yet. And now those families have nothing. He erased the board and wrote out new numbers. Let me put this in terms anyone can understand. If Amazon had come over 10 years, their employees would have paid billions in income taxes. The economic activity they created, the restaurants they'd eat at, the apartments they'd rent, the goods they'd buy, would have generated billions more for the local economy. He turned back to face the room. Tax incentives aren't giving away money. They're agreeing to collect slightly less from something that doesn't exist yet. You didn't save New York billions. You cost them billions. You prevented wealth from being created in the first place. AOC stood up defensive. That's not those incentives could have been used to invest in our communities directly. We could have used that money for what money? Kennedy interrupted gently. The money doesn't exist without the jobs. It's like saying, I declined that $150 job. So now I have $150 to spend. No, ma'am, you have nothing. He clicked to a new image. A video clip from CNBC queued up and ready. This is Andrew Ross Sorsen. He's not exactly a conservative talking head. Let's hear what he said about your economics. The clip played. It's one thing to win the war on Twitter. It's another when it happens in real life to real people with real jobs and real families. I don't get that upset about a lot of things. But this wins a great Twitter war. In real life, it's a very different story. Kennedy paused the video. Even liberal economists were trying to explain to you why you were wrong. But you were too busy celebrating your Twitter victory to listen. Another person stood in the gallery. A man in his 50s wearing a construction worker's vest. Carlos Martinez. He said simply, I'm Maria's brother-in-law. I was supposed to help build that headquarters. 2 years of steady work. Good money enough to support my family comfortably for the first time in my life. Now I drive for Uber. Competing with 1,000 other guys for scraps. A young woman stood next. Jasmine Chen. I'm from California. I moved here for the Amazon job. Sold my car to pay for the move. Shipped all my belongings. Put down a deposit on an apartment near where the campus was going to be built. Then you killed the deal. I'm still paying off the debt from that move. An older man, gay-haired and wearing a faded Union jacket, rose slowly. Thomas Brennan, electrician, 30 years in the trade. I bid on contracts for the Amazon building. Won some of them too. Hired 6 guys. Young guys trying to start their careers. Bought new equipment. Then it all disappeared. Had to let those guys go. Had to sell the equipment at a loss. Some of those young electricians left the trade entirely. Good kids who just needed a chance. A woman in her 30s dressed in business casual stood near the back. Patricia Johnson. I ran a small catering company. We specialized in corporate events and office lunches. When Amazon announced they were coming, I took out a business loan to expand. Bought a bigger commercial kitchen. Hired 3 full-time staff. Signed a lease on a storefront near the proposed campus. Her voice cracked slightly. When the deal died, I was overextended. Lost the business. Lost everything I'd built over 8 years. I'm working as a waitress now. A young man couldn't be more than 25 stood with his mother. Derek Williams. I was finishing my degree in computer science at CUNY. Specifically chose my coursework to match what Amazon was looking for. Had an internship lined up that would have turned into a full-time job after graduation. Now I'm competing for scraps with thousands of other graduates. Most of my friends are leaving New York. There's just nothing here for us anymore. One by one, people stood, each with their own story of opportunity lost. Each with their own personal disaster triggered by one politician's need for a viral moment. A restaurant owner who'd signed a lease expecting Amazon workers. A landlord who'd renovated apartments for incoming employees. A daycare center that had expanded capacity. A dry cleaner who'd invested in new equipment. All of them had believed in the promise of economic growth. All of them had planned, invested, dreamed. All of them had been betrayed by someone who wanted a Twitter victory more than she wanted their prosperity. Kennedy let them speak, let their voices fill the chamber. Then he pulled out a research study. According to researchers at NYU, Amazon's headquarters would have created at least 15,000 additional indirect jobs. That's people who would have worked in restaurants, retail, construction, transportation, all the supporting industries that grow up around major employers. He did the math on the whiteboard. Tens of thousands of direct jobs. 15,000 indirect jobs. That's 40,000 families total. 40,000 households that could have had a better life. 40,000 dreams you crushed. Kennedy looked at AOC. And for what? A tweet. A moment of feeling righteous. 5 seconds of applause from your supporters. He clicked to show recent news articles. Virginia got the headquarters instead. Arlington now has thousands of Amazon employees. Their local economy is booming. Their restaurants are packed. Their property values are up. Their tax revenues are flowing. Then he showed photos of Long Island City. Empty storefronts for lease signs. Stagnant. This is what your district got. Businesses that prepared for the boom went bankrupt. Waiting for growth that never came. Young people are leaving for better opportunities elsewhere. The area that should have been transformed is just stuck. He closed that folder and picked up another one even thicker. But at least the Amazon decision only killed jobs that hadn't been created yet. Your next proposal would destroy millions of jobs that already exist. Let's talk about your Green New Deal. Kennedy's voice dropped lower, more serious. Your Green New Deal. Your signature proposal. The plan you say will save America and create millions of jobs. He clicked his remote. The screen filled with text from the resolution. Let me read some of your goals. Net zero emissions by 2050. 100% renewable energy by 2030. Eliminate all fossil fuels. Retrofit every building in America. Universal jobs guarantee. Universal healthcare. Universal basic income. He looked up from reading. That's ambitious. I'll give you that. Kennedy pulled out a thick stack of economic studies. Multiple independent analyses have tried to calculate what your plan would cost. The range is somewhere between 50 and 90 trillion over 10 years. He let that sit for a moment. Let me put that in perspective. Our entire federal budget, everything the government spends on everything for a whole year, is about $5 trillion. Your plan would cost 10 times that every year for a decade. He walked to the whiteboard and wrote out a comparison. It's like a family that earns 50,000 a year deciding to spend 500,000 a year. It's not ambitious. It's impossible. Kennedy pulled out more documents. But let's say we tried anyway. What would happen? The Heritage Foundation ran the economic models. The same models the government uses to predict these things. Here's what they found. He clicked through slides showing projected impacts. By 2040, Over 1 million jobs would be lost. Not created, lost. And that's just the peak year. Millions more would see their incomes drop. He stopped clicking and turned to face AOC. Every family in America would lose what they earn in almost a year. Just gone. Vanished. That's what your plan would do to working people. A murmur ran through the gallery. Kennedy clicked to images of workers. Oil rig operators. Factory workers. Farmers. Louisiana alone has hundreds of thousands of people working in oil and gas. Your plan eliminates those jobs. All of them. No transition plan. No support. Just too bad. Find something else. He pointed to the image of a rough neck on an oil platform. These are guys making $70-80,000 a year. High school educated. Supporting families. And you want to tell them their jobs are gone. That they should learn to code or something. Kennedy's voice grew more intense. Let me tell you about one of those guys. Jake Thibodeau lives in Houma, Louisiana, 34 years old. Works offshore 2 weeks on 2 weeks off. Makes $82,000 a year. His wife teaches elementary school. 3 kids. They just bought their first house. Not fancy, but theirs. Mortgage is manageable because of his income. He paused. Your Green New Deal eliminates his job overnight. No transition. No support. Just gone. So now what his wife's teacher salary alone? That's $40,000 a year. They lose the house. The kids change schools. The family breaks under the stress. Seen it happen before when industries collapse. Kennedy clicked to another image. Factory workers. Manufacturing uses massive amounts of energy. Your plan makes energy so expensive that factories would move to China. India. Countries that don't care about carbon emissions. So you destroy American jobs while making global pollution worse. He shook his head. But here's the really amazing part. Kennedy clicked to a final slide. A single number. 0.1 degrees Celsius. Even if we did everything in your plan. Even if we spent $100 trillion and destroyed millions of jobs and bankrupted the country. Even if we achieved every impossible goal you set. He pointed at the number. Global temperatures would decrease by 1/10 of 1 degree. By 2100. The room was silent. 1/10th of 1 degree by the end of the century. Kennedy's voice was soft but cutting. It's like burning down your house to kill a single mosquito. Technically, it works, but the cost is insane. He pulled out more documents. And here's the real kicker. 80% of solar panels are made in China. 70% of lithium batteries are made in China. 60% of rare earth minerals are controlled by China. Kennedy looked directly at AOC. You're not saving the planet. You're outsourcing our economy to our biggest rival while China builds a new coal plant every week. He clicked to show Germany's energy transformation. Germany tried a softer version of your plan. They call it Energiewende. After spending over $500 billion, they had to turn coal plants back on because renewables couldn't meet demand. They now have some of the highest electricity costs in the world. And their emissions barely dropped. Click. California. California pushed aggressive green energy. The result? Rolling blackouts. Elderly people dying in heat waves because the power shut off when they needed air conditioning most. Click. Texas. Texas had one cold snap and wind turbines froze. People died. Kennedy closed the folder. Your plan isn't about saving the environment. It's about feeling righteous while you destroy the economy. It's about Twitter moments and Instagram posts. Not about actually helping people or the planet. He reached for yet another folder. But paused. You know what? At least the Green New Deal is just a proposal. It hasn't destroyed anything yet. Except your credibility with economists. But there's one person whose suffering wasn't theoretical. One person who needed help and you were in a position to provide it. Kennedy opened the folder and pulled out a printed tweet. Let's talk about your grandmother. The screen filled with an image from AOC's own Twitter account. The tweet was dated June 2021. Below the text was a photo of a house in devastation. Roof collapsed. Water damage everywhere. Belongings ruined. Kennedy read the tweet aloud. Just over a week ago. My abua fell ill. I went to Puerto Rico to see her my first time in a year plus because of CO. This is her home. Hurricane Maria relief hasn't arrived. Trump blocked relief money for PR. He looked up at AOC. Hurricane Maria hit in September 2017. You posted this tweet in June 2021. That's almost 4 years. Congresswoman Kennedy clicked to show a timeline. September 2017. Hurricane destroys your grandmother's home. You're still bartending in New York at this point. Click. November 2018. You're elected to Congress. Salary jumps to $174,000 a year. Click. 2019-2021. 3 years pass. You buy a Tesla. You maintain 2 apartments. You attend the Met Gala in designer clothes. Your grandmother still lives with a collapsed roof. Click. June 2021. You post photos of her suffering. Not to get her help. To attack a political opponent. Kennedy paused, letting that sink in. Within hours of your tweet, something interesting happened. Regular Americans, many of whom probably disagree with your politics, started a GoFundMe campaign. Plumbers, nurses, teachers, construction workers, people with far less money than you. In just 2 days, they raised over $100 to fix your grandmother's house. He clicked to show screenshots of the fundraiser. Donations rolled by. $20 here, $50 there, $100 from someone whose note said, "Nobody's grandmother should live like this." You know what you did? Kennedy asked quietly. You rejected the money. Confusion rippled through the gallery. Your spokesperson said, and I'm quoting here, "We will not be accepting money from right-wing activists." And Kennedy's voice hardened. Right-wing activists. That's what you called these working people who just wanted to help an elderly woman. Because they didn't vote the way you wanted. Their compassion was insulting to you. He pulled out printouts of some of the donations. Read them aloud. Sarah Martinez, Phoenix, Arizona, donated $50. Her note said, "I'm a single mom. This is my grocery money for the week. But nobody's grandmother should live like this." James Chen, Seattle, Washington, donated $100. His note, "My own grandmother died in a house with mold after Katrina. I can't let this happen to someone else's abuela." Patricia O'Brien, Boston, Massachusetts, donated $25. Her note, "I'm on disability. This is all I can give. Please help this woman." Kennedy looked up, his eyes glistening slightly. These are the people you insulted. These are the right-wing activists whose help was beneath you. They gave money they could barely afford to give to help a woman they'd never met because it was the right thing to do. He shook his head. And you rejected them, not because their money wasn't good enough, but because accepting it would destroy your narrative that Trump was the villain in your grandmother's story. You needed her to keep suffering so you could keep blaming him. He leaned forward. Let me ask you some very simple questions, Congresswoman, and I'd appreciate yes or no answers. You make $174 a year. Yes or no? AOC hesitated then. Yes, but yes or no? Ma'am, yes. You rent 2 apartments and own a Tesla. Correct. That's a gross simplification of yes or no. Her jaw clenched. Yes. A typical roof repair in Puerto Rico costs between $8 and $15. Do you dispute that number? I don't know the exact 8 to 15.000, ma'am. 1 month of your salary could have fixed your grandmother's roof. Do you dispute that silence? So my question is simple. Why did you let your own grandmother live in those conditions for nearly 4 years when you could have easily helped her? AOC's voice rose. This is a personal attack. My grandmother's situation is, you made it public. Ma'am, you posted it on Twitter for millions to see. You used her suffering as a political weapon. So, I'll ask again, why didn't you help her? The question hung in the air. AOC opened her mouth. Closed. It opened it again. No answer came. Kennedy pulled up a comparison on the screen. Side by side, AOC's Tesla costs more than $50. Grandmother's roof would have cost less than $15,000. AOC's 2 apartments. Combined rent exceeds $4,000 per month. Grandmother's roof one-time cost of $15,000. AOC's restaurant meals. Regular Instagram posts from upscale restaurants. Grandmother lived with buckets catching rainwater for years. You chose a luxury car over your own grandmother's shelter. Kennedy said, you chose expensive restaurants and designer clothes over your own flesh and blood. He clicked to show the split screen again. AOC at the Met Gala. AOC's grandmother's destroyed home. You preached about caring for the vulnerable while your own grandmother suffered. You lectured others about wealth inequality while you lived lavishly and she lived in ruins. You called for taxing the rich while accepting expensive gifts and letting your family member go without. Kennedy's voice dropped lower. But the worst part, when regular Americans tried to help people with far less money than you You rejected their generosity because it would ruin your political narrative. You preferred to let your grandmother suffer than to accept help from people who disagree with you. He closed that folder and stood up straight. You know what that tells me? It tells me you're not a champion of the people. You're someone who uses people, even your own family, as props for your political theater. Kennedy walked back to his table and arranged 6 folders in a row. We've covered a lot of ground today. Your Met Gala hypocrisy, the tens of thousands of jobs you destroyed in New York, your economically impossible Green New Deal, your exploitation of your own grandmother's suffering. But when you look at all of it together, a pattern emerges. He gestured at the folders. Shall we examine that pattern? Kennedy clicked his remote one final time. A large chart filled the screen, divided into 2 columns. What AOC says. What AOC does. The items filled in one by one. Tax the rich. Accepts thousands in luxury goods. Fails to pay vendors. Fight corruption. Violates house ethics rules. Pays bills only when caught. Economic justice. Destroys tens of thousands of working-class jobs. Care for the vulnerable. Lets own grandmother live in ruins for years. Socialist redistribution, lives lavishly while preaching sacrifice. Champion of the people, rejects help from wrong people. Kennedy let the chart speak for itself for a long moment. Every single time the pattern is clear as day. You talk about helping others, but you help yourself. You preach sacrifice, but you live in luxury. You claim to fight the elite. But Congresswoman, he paused, you are the elite. You just wear designer clothes with tax the rich written on them instead of admitting it. Maria Rodriguez stood again in the gallery. I'm still working 2 jobs, she said, her voice stronger now. My oldest son dropped out of high school last year to help with rent. We could have made it if I'd gotten that Amazon job. But Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez said it was corporate welfare. Well, my suffering is real welfare. Welfare I didn't choose. A man in his 50s stood next. Robert Chen. I owned a small cafe near where Amazon was supposed to build. I took out a loan, hired extra staff, renovated my space to prepare for the business boom. Then you killed the deal. I lost everything. Declared bankruptcy at 53 years old. Thanks for saving me from corporate greed. A young woman. Tanya Williams. I went to CUNY like you said to do. Studied computer science. Was going to apply to Amazon when they opened. Now I'm leaving New York because there are no good tech jobs here anymore. You drove away opportunity and then blamed everyone else. One by one they stood. One by one they told their stories. The real human cost of political theater. Kennedy let each person speak. Let their words fill the chamber. When they finished, he turned back to AOC. These are your constituents, Congresswoman, the people you claim to represent. They're not billionaires. They're not corporations. They're working people whose lives you destroyed for Twitter likes. AOC stood, her voice shaking with emotion. This is a coordinated attack. This is the patriarchy. The system trying to silence a strong woman of color who dares to challenge. Ma'am, Kennedy's voice cut through her defense like a knife. I'm reading from official documents. House Ethics Committee findings. Economic studies. Census data. Your own tweets. He held up the stack of papers. These are facts. When facts are uncomfortable, they don't become attacks. They're still just facts. But I'm a woman of color. Jessica, the hairstylist you didn't pay for 6 months. Woman of color. Maria Rodriguez, who lost the Amazon job opportunity. Latina. Many of the people hurt by your decisions. People of color. Kennedy's voice was firm. Now this isn't about race or gender. It's about whether you keep your promises and tell the truth. And the evidence. Your evidence from your actions shows you don't. He pointed at the gallery. The people in this room aren't attacking you because of your identity. They're holding you accountable because of your actions. The gallery had changed completely. Where AOC's supporters had cheered her entrance, now most had left. Those who remained looked uncomfortable, uncertain. Some were actively nodding along with Kennedy's words. A staffer rushed over and whispered something to Kennedy. He glanced at a phone, then looked up. Apparently, #AOC exposed is trending nationwide right now. Number 1. AOC's face had gone pale. Had gone. Her hands were shaking. Makeup that had been perfect that morning was now running slightly from stress sweat. The confident, fiery representative who'd stormed into this hearing looked broken. She started, voice trembling. I've dedicated my life to public service. I've fought for you, fought for yourself. Ma'am, Kennedy's voice was almost gentle now. Sympathetic even. That's what the evidence shows. Not what I say. What your actions demonstrate. He walked back to his seat. Arranged his papers. I take no pleasure in this. Truly. But you attacked me when I was here as a witness. You called me a racist. You said I protect billionaires while people die. You made this personal. Kennedy looked directly at her. All I did was respond with facts about your record. Your choices. Your hypocrisy. If those facts are devastating to your reputation, perhaps you should have considered that before launching your attack. The chairman banged his gavel. The committee will take a 30-minute recess. But AOC was already leaving. She couldn't stay. Her staff scrambled to follow her as she rushed out of the chamber. Hand over her face. The cameras captured every moment of her exit. The gallery erupted, not in cheers, in murmurs of shock and discussion. Reporters were typing furiously, phones pressed to ears. Filing reports. Kennedy remained seated, quietly organizing his folders. He didn't look triumphant. He looked tired. The news cycle had been relentless. CNN Ocasio-Cortez approval rating drops 23 points in her district. The poll numbers told a brutal story. Among constituents in her own district, support had collapsed from 68% to 45%. Among independents, she was underwater by 30 points. Even among progressive Democrats, her favorability had taken a significant hit. Fox News primary challenger announces time for real leadership. Michelle Caruso Cabrera, a moderate Democrat and former CNBC anchor, had announced her candidacy. Her first campaign ad featured Maria Rodriguez telling her story about the lost Amazon job. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez fights for Twitter. "I'll fight for you" was the tagline. Early polls showed the race as a toss-up. New York Times House Ethics Committee expands investigation into AOC. What had started as the Met Gala inquiry had now grown. The committee was examining campaign finance practices, family employment arrangements, and potential misuse of congressional resources. 3 other Democrats on the committee who had previously defended AOC were now silent. Politico. Major donors pulled support following hearing testimony. Justice Democrats, the progressive organization that had backed AOC's initial campaign, announced they would be reassessing their support. The Democratic Socialists of America released a statement saying they were concerned about the allegations and looking into them. Translation in political speak: she was on her own. The Washington Post. Democrats distanced themselves from Ocasio-Cortez. Party leadership had stopped returning her calls. Committee assignments were being quietly discussed. None in her favor. The Congressional Progressive Caucus issued a bland statement that didn't explicitly support her. Chuck Schumer, when asked about the situation, said only no comment and walked away. Local NYC News. Queens business owners. We told you so about Amazon. A devastating segment featured small business owners in Long Island City. The coffee shop that had closed. The bookstore that barely survived. The restaurant that downsized. All of them recounting how they'd supported the Amazon deal. How they'd been called sellouts by AOC supporters. And how they'd been proven right. The anchor didn't editorialize. She didn't need to. The empty storefronts told the story. Business Insider. The economic impact of AOC's Amazon opposition. A retrospective. An exhaustive analysis comparing Long Island City to Arlington, Virginia, where Amazon's other headquarters went. The numbers were damning. Arlington had seen job growth, rising tax revenues, new businesses opening. Long Island City had seen stagnation, businesses closing, young professionals leaving. The article included interviews with economists from across the political spectrum. Even those sympathetic to progressive politics admitted the decision had been an economic disaster. In Kennedy's office in Louisiana, he sat with his chief of staff watching the coverage with no satisfaction. "Senator, you have interview requests from every major network," his aide said. "Everyone wants to talk about what happened." Kennedy shook his head. "No interviews. Michael, this wasn't about winning a political fight." He picked up a photo from his desk. A small community bank in Louisiana that had failed during the financial crisis. Good people who'd lost their savings because bigger, better connected banks got the bailouts instead. This was about real people being hurt by politicians who care more about their image than their constituents. There's no joy in that. He put the photo back down and looked out the window at the Louisiana state capitol. "You know what bothers me most? She had every opportunity to be what she claimed to be. Young, energetic, genuinely connected to working people. She could have been a real voice for her community. Instead, she chose to be a performer. Michael nodded. The media is calling you a hero to some, a villain to others. I'm neither, Kennedy said quietly. I'm just a senator who got attacked and defended himself with facts. That shouldn't be heroic. That should be normal. He stood and walked to a shelf where he kept letters from constituents. Pulled one out at random. This is from a woman in Baton Rouge. Her daughter was going to go to nursing school but couldn't afford it. She thanks me for voting for the community college funding bill that made it possible. He put the letter back carefully. That's the job. Not Twitter fights. Not viral moments. Helping real people solve real problems. Michael waited knowing his boss wasn't finished. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez forgot that. Or maybe she never learned it. She got famous. Got addicted to the attention. And forgot why she ran for office in the first place. Now she's paying the price. Kennedy walked back to his desk. Set up meetings with banking associations. Let's work on legislation to prevent this kind of thing. Politicians using their office for personal gain. That's how we honor the people who were hurt. By making sure it doesn't happen again. His aide nodded and left. Kennedy sat alone in his office looking out at Baton Rouge. The sun was setting over the Louisiana Capitol building, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Beautiful like it was every evening regardless of the political chaos of the day. He thought about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez somewhere in New York. She was probably dealing with her own sunset. But hers would be darker. Calls from party leadership telling her to keep her head down. Angry constituents demanding answers. A primary fight that would be brutal. Donors who'd moved on to the next progressive star. He felt no satisfaction in her downfall. Just a sense of something necessary having been done. Like a surgeon removing a tumor, unpleasant but required. His phone buzzed. A text from his wife. Saw the news. You okay? He smiled and texted back. Fine. Home for dinner. Gumbo's ready. That was Louisiana. No matter what happened in Washington, there was always gumbo waiting at home. There was always something real and solid to return to. Kennedy thought about Maria Rodriguez working her 2 jobs. Trying to keep her family together after the Amazon opportunity vanished. He thought about Jessica, the hairstylist, still paying off that payday loan. He thought about all the others who'd stood up in that hearing room and told their truths. They were the real heroes. They'd been betrayed, hurt, dismissed, and they'd still found the courage to speak. He made a mental note to follow up on Maria's case. Maybe there was something his office could do. Connect her with job training programs. Help with housing assistance applications. It wouldn't give her back the Amazon job. But it would be something. That was the real work of a senator. Not the hearings. Not the speeches. Not the cable news appearances. The quiet work of helping constituents navigate bureaucracy. Solve problems. Find opportunities. One person at a time. His office door opened. Michael poked his head in. Senator, there's one more thing. That GoFundMe that was set up for AOC's grandmother. The one she rejected. Kennedy looked up. What about it? The organizers distributed it to hurricane relief organizations in Puerto Rico. Helped repair 12 homes. One of them was for an elderly woman whose roof had been damaged in the same storm as AOC's grandmother. Kennedy smiled for the first time that day. Good. At least something positive came from all this. Also, Michael added, I got a call from Jessica, the hairstylist. She wanted to thank you for telling her story. Said she's gotten 36 new clients since the hearing. People saw her on TV. Looked up her salon. Wanted to support her. That's good to hear. She said to tell you that sometimes the truth does matter. That she'd almost given up believing it. But maybe she was wrong. Kennedy nodded slowly. Tell her I'm glad. And tell her that the truth always matters. Sometimes it just takes a while to be heard. After Michael left, Kennedy sat in the gathering darkness for a few more minutes. The Capitol building's lights were coming on one by one as the sun finished setting. In Louisiana, they believed you should be able to defend your record. If you couldn't, maybe you shouldn't be in public office. It was that simple. It had always been that simple. But somewhere along the way, politics had become more about performance than service. More about followers than constituents. More about going viral than making a difference. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez wasn't the first politician to fall into that trap. She wouldn't be the last. But maybe, just maybe, Her very public reckoning would remind a few others that actions have consequences. That words and deeds must align. That you can't claim to champion the people while using them as props. Kennedy packed his briefcase and headed for the door. The Capitol would still be there tomorrow. The problems would still need solving. The work would continue. But tonight, there was gumbo waiting and a wife who didn't care about Senate hearings or Twitter trends. There was real life solid and unchanging waiting for him to come home. As he walked to his car, his phone rang one final time. He looked at the number. A reporter from the New York Times. He let it go to voicemail. Some stories told themselves. This one was over. The phone on his desk rang. He let it go to voicemail. There would be more calls. More requests. More people wanting to talk about the confrontation. But for John Kennedy, it had never been about confrontation. It had been about truth. And sometimes the truth was all you needed. The Senate Banking Committee hearing room stood empty now. Chairs pushed back. Papers scattered. Water glasses forgotten on the table. Above the chairman's seat hung portraits of past committee leaders. Men and women who'd shaped American financial policy for generations. They looked down on the empty room with painted dignity. On the table, someone had left a single folder. Inside were more letters from constituents. More stories of jobs, lost opportunities, destroyed, promises broken, real people, real lives. The cleaning crew would come through soon and sweep it all away. The room would be reset for tomorrow's hearing. Tomorrow's drama. Tomorrow's political theater. But the questions would remain. How many political careers could survive the simple test of matching words to actions? How many politicians could withstand basic scrutiny of their own records? And how long could anyone claim to fight for the people while living off their suffering? In the gathering darkness, the portraits offered no answers. They simply watched as they'd watched countless politicians come and go, as they'd witnessed truth and lies blend together in the endless churn of American politics. Some careers ended in scandal. Some in defeat. Some in quiet retirement. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's career wasn't over yet. But after today, it would never be the same. And somewhere in Louisiana, a folksy senator with an Oxford education was already thinking about the next problem that needed solving. The next truth that needed telling, the next politician who needed reminding that public service meant serving the public. Not yourself. The sun set over Washington. The cameras stopped rolling. The reporters filed their stories. And the American political machine ground on, indifferent to individual fates. Waiting for tomorrow's drama. Tomorrow's scandal. Tomorrow's reckoning.